Hello and welcome to this episode of Read Play Game, the podcast where we look at tabletop role-playing games from every side of the table. I'm the rules lawyer, and this week I will be not GMing, but TPing for us for this game, Goblin Errands.
Hi, I'm Emma, and I will be playing.
I'm Manish Pinamaraju, and I'll be playing.
I'm Tori Jewell, and I'll be playing.
I'm Mikey Sparks, and I will also be playing.
This is a special game because it's our 1-year anniversary. And we all started by playing a game where we were all goblins. So now we're revisiting that.
For people tuning in for the first time, this is the first of 3 parts that make up the structure of the podcast, the read portion. We won't just be reading, though. We'll be walking through the character creation process of an RPG that we've selected for this week, talking through the rules as we go. This will then be followed by later episodes where we play through a brief game using these characters, then reflect on the system. Feel free to listen to whichever of these interest you, and feel free to skip whichever ones don't. So, like Tori was just saying, happy anniversary to the podcast. Yay!
Yay! 100 years, roleplay game.
I don't know what episode. This is probably like close to episode 50
Almost.
when this will be coming out. So thank you so much for listening this long. And if you're just now joining us, please listen to us for at least another year, maybe 100, because this was one that we didn't roll for. We just, I was walking in my local game store and I saw this game. It was like in a little, sometimes when you go to these local game stores, they've got like them in a little plastic bag instead of like wrapped in plastic wrap or just like separate as a book. So it's like, I don't know, because it's kind of a smaller book, but this is a special little indie game that was very exciting to me because it reminded me of that game we played when we first got together back in, I want to say, Anish sent the screenshots recently. I think I sent a text about it literally on January 1st, 2020.
Wow.
Because I thought it was 2019 because I knew we got some games in person, but I guess literally those games were in person before the pandemic hit. So
Yeah.
that was destined to be an online game, I guess. But we do have a couple. Maybe we should post that in-person recording we have. We can mute it.
Yeah, without audio, we can post it. We can't post it with audio.
It is me describing a graphic act that occurred in our first game session. Yeah.
Yes, the game we're about to play is very wholesome in nature, but the original game we played, which was through a system that is now defunct, called Weave,
Mm-hmm.
the tone of that game was incredibly raunchy, and multiple plot-relevant blowjobs did occur.
Really?
Frequently.
There were multiple?
Yeah. There were multiple, I think.
Specifically blowjobs?
There's a lot of...
It was 4 years ago. We were different people back then.
I was fucked up back then.
It just was like my first
Twisted.
time really like in a party, and I feel like that's kind of the go-to like comedic relief type thing. Like I feel like the classic starting character is like a horny bard, you know what I mean?
Danny the Warthog DeVito was my first character ever.
So cut me some slack. I just wanted to fit in.
I mean, your character, even with, because I know there is a very real first character type archetype in people. I did the same thing, but mine was sort of a chaos hatred kind of guy, which was not great.
Warlock moment.
A warlock, yeah. But you did have some very unique and inspired choices as that character.
Yeah, I know. I tend to do that. Yeah. That's what people say about me. They say unique, inspired. Yeah.
So I think it was still extremely fun, but we'll go over what those characters were and sort of, because this is going to be is actually a prequel to the game we played, because the game we played kind of went in all sorts of insane directions. So we're gonna go back to, again, Anish was saying this is a wholesome, very much, there's like a rule in this game about like you can't die. So that'll be great for a prequel because all of these characters going into it were alive. At least
Palate cleanser after heart.
A game we haven't announced, by the way. We haven't said the name.
Oh, Goblin Errands. We're playing Goblin Errands today by Martin Nerurkar. It was published by his independent game label, Shark Bomb Studios. Anish, you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I was reading up about the game, and it's actually very interesting how it developed. It started as a shitpost tweet that Martin made in
like all
April
good things
2021. Like most good ideas. And he was essentially trying to hack a cozy little Hobbit RPG made by Joshua McCrowell called Underhill by Water, and wanted to turn it into a mischievous RPG filled with dirty gabbos.
Yay.
Inspired by the likes of the video game Untitled Goose Game. So just know that
I love that game.
That's the DNA that made this little RPG. But after some playtesting, that initial idea of the mischievous Goblin RPG kind of transformed into a more wholesome experience, fueled by Martin's dedicated love of goblins and his lifelong interest in community.
Oh.
There's a very sweet passage at the end of the rules where he talks about his love for goblins. It's in the designer notes. It's also got a little picture of what I assume is him as a goblin, which is cute. But it's, my love for goblins goes back quite a while. In fact, I distinctly remember that when I first started playing Magic the Gathering in the 90s. So shout out to Magic the Gathering. Let's go. I must have been 13 or 14 years old. I quickly took to the goblin cards. There's something about these resourceful little guys that has always struck a chord with me. Probably because I identify strongly with the idea of being a scrappy underdog myself. Or maybe it's just because I'm rather short. In spite of that, though, I never really thought much about making a game about goblins until a half-joking social media post, etc., into what Anish said. So it's very sweet that it came from a place of love like that, and you can definitely see it in the way the game is designed. So kind of going into the prep and what you'll need for this game, it's intended as, and we've played games like this before, a no-prep game, which I'll warn, does not necessarily, especially from a game master side, does not necessarily mean literally no prep. I would recommend having some prep going into a game like this. However, by no prep, it does mean that it gives you all the tools to prep yourself pretty much in the book. I mean, some people are really good at that.
I feel for me, I agree, like no prep, you do have to do something, but this is a game that ideally you can be hanging out and be like, oh, we should play this. Like, everybody grab a snack, give me 10, and then we'll go. You know, like it's a very quick turnaround for prep. Yeah,
the prep, like I was, to be honest, I put off prep longer than I should have. But when I was stressed about it, like kind of figuring it out, I was like, oh, this will take a couple minutes. What's nice is that it gives you basically a bunch of tables to generate, and especially since we already had this existing world to fill in, the ideas kind of just started rolling with the inspiration, which was really nice. So it's got some great tools for that. So anyway. The premise of the game, Goblin Errands, you're small, tiny little goblins, and you're put into a world that is not made for you. It's made for tall people, like humans. I'm sure in a fantasy setting there's elves, etc. So like anything that's not a goblin. So it's kind of just, even the most mundane of errands can become a huge feat because you are so small. And so you're not very strong. To play this, you can play with a group of 2 to 4 goblins, the players, and 1 tall person, which is what they call the GM. They abbreviate it to TP, intentionally invoking the comparison to toilet paper.
I was about to say.
I believe.
Why?
I believe well, so that they don't take themselves too seriously. I think that Martin wrote somewhere, which is honestly humbling. You know, like for me, like.
Okay.
I needed that. To play, what you'll need resource-wise is, of course, those 3 to 5 players, including the tall person. It says about, okay, we've talked before about what time estimates actually mean, but it says about 3 hours, including the time spent making goblins or the errand. So give or take, we'll see what that ends up being. No shade to that recommendation, because that is hard to put a actual number on when you're making a game. 1 20-sided die, preferably 1 per player. 1 token to represent the focus, a spoon, is recommended. Obviously, that is something that represents what we would have in a physical game, like an in-person game. So we'll talk about how that translates to an online game like this.
Is it because it's shiny? Do they give a reason why a spoon?
I believe that's why, yeah. It's essentially the collective brain cell or skill of the entire party, and you all kind of like pass it around depending on who is the most inspired at the moment. It's a fun mechanic. And then copies of the Goblin playbooks hand out to the players, and crayons to fill in said playbooks.
I have a crayon. That is what... I don't know where it went, but... Oh, here it is.
Beautiful. Wow. Oh, it's green. It's green like a goblin.
I used it to color my nose.
Wow, gorgeous. And I'm sure we'll release promo clips with it, but Tori's look is... Tori's goblining out right now. Tori, we got full Gatos mode right here.
Yeah, it's no big deal. I feel they actually had named some mechanics after me, so you're welcome.
Hands, legs, eyes, and...
Yeah.
Okay, so going into the next part, another important rule to note, which does not apply to us, is additionally, if you have the luxury of playing in a shared space and you're taking the role of a goblin, then you're required to bring snacks or drinks as an offering to the TP and the rest of the Ken.
I love this.
That's why I was late.
Yeah.
Thanks for the snacks, Emma.
To be
Well,
fair,
for
you
the
did
TP.
get me a snack. So actually, that's great.
You actually were the only one
Yeah.
who
So
followed the rules.
And just to be sure, it's bad form to bring something that only you enjoy, so you don't have to share.
I love that note.
The game itself unfolds as a conversation between the TP and the other players. The TP describes the situations and people of the world, and the players ask questions to describe the actions they want to take. That's basically just describing how role-playing games work, but it's a back and forth. And I want to say this is rules light. It is. The rules are simple, but it's also intended to just be very, it's one of those games where it very much is not strict on the rules. It has the rule of cool emphasized throughout. So, jumping into the actual mechanics, there are two things that are really going to influence the outcomes of the game, which are focus and risk rolls. First, we'll talk about the focus, because that's what's listed first, and that's sort of the newest mechanic in terms of what you actually might be familiar with, because we all know risk rolls, we've played games. What it says at the beginning is, a gaggle of goblins is a dynamic affair, a bundle of manic, easily distracted energy that bounces off the walls wildly. The focus represents an individual goblin's ability to concentrate, to direct their energy, and to truly leverage their skills and abilities. It's the one functioning brain cell that's shared among the lot. It's their zany group dynamic. So in a physical game, you would have an object. It recommends a spoon. It can either be held by one player at a time, or it can be unused and rest somewhere on the table so that every player can reach it. Martin recommends a spoon, since most people have access to one. They're fun to play around with, shiny to boot, and most importantly, it's really hard to hurt yourself while playing absentmindedly with it. So what you start with is you have the focus in the center of the table. For our purposes, it just means nobody has the focus. So when does a player get to grab it? When their goblin does or says something funny, whether it's stupid puns, hilarious mishaps, clever comebacks, or anything. If it makes the entire table laugh or groan, then you get to take the focus, which applies whether someone has it or not. So generally someone's going to have the focus unless it's being used and is placed back in the center. But if somebody has the focus and you do a funny thing that makes everyone laugh, you get to take it from them. Since it's a bit subjective, it's up to the TP to make the final call, but all players should feel free to call out focus-worthy moments. So, I mean, if you think you just killed a joke and you could be like, I think I deserve the focus for that, then do it. That's the heart of the game. I really like that it encourages the atmosphere that it wants to have.
And we can be like, not funny, didn't laugh.
Yeah, how devastating is it to be like, don't I deserve a focus point, and then nobody agrees with you?
That might happen a couple times. We'll stop the game each time and have the audience vote on who deserves the focus. So the purpose of the focus is dependent on your Goblin playbook, which I know you all might have looked at your playbooks at this point, and essentially you have special abilities that are going to tell you what you can use the focus for. Does anyone have an example ability that they want to read that uses focus?
I just like the title of mine, Fool's Inspiration. As long as you have focus, you can motivate another goblin with some words and or a suitable grimace. They grab the focus and gain +1 dice to their next roll.
Oh, that's great. So that's a way to pass along the focus and utilize the focus, which is nice.
I like this one I have that's called It's Mine. Spin the focus to lick a non-sentient object to claim it as your own. Anybody else will find it difficult to use or to hold on to it, maybe because of all the drool.
Those were great examples of abilities because they illustrate sort of the differences between the abilities. So spending the focus, which is what I believe the Nibbler's one that you just read said, means you put it back in the center of the table. You no longer have it. However, Tori's ability that you just said for Gatos, you hand it to someone else instead of putting it in the center. So
that is fun.
Important differences.
Yeah, I've got enough on my own. Give some to someone else, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if there's certain players who end up having the focus more, and then we'll count each time someone gets the focus, and then create a metric on the funniest member of the podcast.
Oh God, +1 on a D20 feels like peanuts.
We're little goblins. I don't know.
Or maybe it's set up that we
Read the ability again.
they grab the focus and grab +1 dice to their next roll.
+1 dice.
Yeah, not +1 on D20.
Oh,
So if this was a D20 system, that might be peanuts, but we do not roll a D20 for
I thought
risky roll.
why did I hear
Yeah,
D20?
why does it say that everyone has a D20? That's for character generation stuff.
This game uses a 5d6 system, so you roll 5d6, and then you can get an extra d6 on stuff. The d20s that we roll are mostly for random charts, any character generation stuff.
Another thing, so that, it might feel bad if you have the focus but haven't yet used it and someone's going to take it from you. However, if you are still holding it at the moment that someone else gains it, you do have to hand it to them, but you either lose your ability to spend it or you can find a way to use it while you're handing it over. It's explicitly allowed, but you better think and talk fast. So you can justify, as long as in the moment you can find some way to use an ability with it, you are welcome to do that in the moment as you're handing it over.
Oh.
Now you might be thinking, that's a lot of pressure to get the focus. I might not always have the focus and I might still want to use one of my abilities. If you want to use an ability that requires you to spend the focus, but you don't have it, you can announce that you want to overextend yourself. The TP will roll a single 6-sided die, and on a 5 or 6, you are successful, even if the outcome might be a little more haphazard than normal. But if you are not successful, you may just find out at the worst time. You were sure the item you pulled out of your pack was a hammer until you go to hit a nail with it and it turns out what you've been holding this entire time was a bell. Or maybe your harebrained plan is going off perfectly until halfway through you notice that you've missed one crucial detail. Failing to overextend will definitely make things complicated. Questions so far?
I have a question for us specifically playing on Zoom. That mechanic of you have until you physically hand the focus over sounds quite fun. Do we want to put in if the focus is shifting, we put 5 seconds on the clock, or we just start counting down or something, some kind of time pressure to evoke that?
Yeah.
Love it. Keep us honest.
Do we want to do 5 or 10?
5!
All right. It is law. The gif of Obama hitting the duck.
What?
What?
I know what you're talking
Duck
about.
slap.
It is law.
What?
It is law.
Hold on.
Anyway.
Matt Cam. Yeah, you have to find that.
Okay, and so next we'll talk about risk roll, but I do like in between the focus part and risk roll, Martin added a note on ableism, which I think is great to include here. I'll just read kind of what he wrote here. This is a good moment to talk about the topic of ableism, discrimination or prejudice against disabled or differently abled people. The goblins clearly have different competencies than the tall folks do. They are smaller and weaker, and their short attention span can also make things difficult. But they are also gifted with an abundance of energy and heart. They are nimble, social, and creative. Since Goblin Errands is a silly game, one could reasonably believe that it was trying to make fun of people with disabilities. This is not the intention. This game and me, the author, do not consider the goblins to be worthy of ridicule. Quite the opposite. I hold a deep fondness for the little creatures. They are our little misfit heroes for a reason, and since they don't take themselves all too seriously, then neither should we. In this way, humor can be powerful and help lessen the sting of an uncaring or ill-fitting world. A fact these adorable underdogs are pretty familiar with. I think it's really nice how Martin injects his love for goblins, his just very genuine love for the concept into a lot of this, because I think that can go into some weird territory, especially with existing media around goblins and such.
Yeah, and as somebody with a low attention span, it's nice to hear it in a positive context, in an endearing way.
This will be an awesome game for people with low attention spans, of which we have 0. Yeah. Okay, going into the mechanic of risk roll, which is basically the main rolling part of the game. When you attempt to do something risky, the TP might call for a risk roll. You will roll a number of 6-sided dice to figure out how successful the action was, and that will correspond to your stat. So in this game, like many RPGs, the characters have stats. In this one specifically, the stats are hands, legs, eyes, mouth, frame, and heart. What if we each took one skill and read out the words?
Sure. Hands. When you're rolling hands, you're rolling for things like holding, building, throwing, breaking, or grabbing things.
Legs, where you are being quick, running, climbing, jumping, or kicking stuff.
Eyes, sensing the world, making connections, or gaining insight.
Mouth, talking, singing, pleading, and, of course, eating and spitting. Patui.
And then the other 2 skills are frame, feats of strength, and physical power. This stat is always at 0.
Aww.
And heart, energy, endurance, and toughness. This stat is always infinite.
That's so
You might be
sweet.
wondering, what does that mean? Yeah, right? The goblins have infinite heart. So those are roles that I think primarily serve the purpose to establish the bounds of the game and just give you the theme and vibe where it's like, these goblins, they're not going to be very physically competent, and there's a lot of tasks they're not going to be able to do. So that's that limitation. However, you can still technically attempt it. And then heart is, emphasizing the love and the infinite capacity for that, for heart that these goblins have. So you might think like, oh, there's no point in using those mechanics, but they do kind of go into exactly what you can do with that.
Yeah, there's sort of the boundary boxes that we kind of push up against. And it's interesting fitting in a previous game with these mechanics, because in Weave, there was a class whose pure stat was rocks, which represented toughness, which is Tofu, Mikey's little goblin, who's actually a very big and strong goblin. So we might see some interesting interaction in that sense, because this game's philosophy on goblins is that they can't do crazy feats of
I will
strength.
say it is interesting looking at the stats, because it feels like, I mean, there's feats of strength and physical power, but also with hands is like breaking things. So there is like that aspect too. So it's interesting how that's split, because I guess it's like breaking is less, directly related to physicality and can be related more to like mischievousness and clumsy whimsy.
And I think it's especially good and like especially intended to be compared to like humans, compared to the physical abilities of humans, and because the emphasis of this game is them existing in a world that's not meant for them. So you could be a very, very strong goblin, but maybe that doesn't compare as much to like a normal human, which I mean, we do in our original game, we did take liberties with. So in comparison to the original game, which like we said was Weave was a game that was intended as a combination of like tarot card reading and storytelling. So they had essentially set different settings that you could choose. I think they had about 4 settings. The options were the goblin one that we played, which was a parody of like D&D fantasy settings, but you all play as goblins. Similar to this, there was one that was like, themed around like the Goonies. I think it was a direct parody of the Goonies. So, I mean, kind of similar to like Kids and Bikes, what we played, just like the 80s vibe. And then there was one that was a cyberpunk setting. And there was one that was, I don't remember the 4th one, but it doesn't really matter. Oh, it was like space, because we started with that one. Yeah. So that was like a Star Trek kind of vibe. All of which we've kind of covered here, except like cyberpunk explicitly. So anyway, the core thing tying all those things together was that there were a set of tarot cards, all of which were already pre-entered in the system with written scenarios corresponding to each card. There were 3 aspects. There were plots, or that there were like, I think they were called like twists. There were characters, and there were like locations tied to each thing. And so the GM for a session would draw a card for each of these things, and that would set the stage. And it was basically a way of giving inspiration to a GM. But each of the characters, there were 4 stats: stones, gales, brooks, and flames. Each of which were like, stones was physical stuff, gales was like dexterity type vibe, flames was like intelligence and magic, and brooks was social skills. And each character would pick that as their main stat. So each of our characters, and we'll go into the specific other characters when we get to character creation, but each of our characters corresponded to that. So it's interesting to see 4 main stats in this game as well, and I'm wondering how that will distribute with you
And
all.
to translate it from nerd language, Gales is wind and Brooks is water. So they're the 4 elements.
Sorry for all the jocks that listen to our game, all the pop, or listen to our podcast.
In English, please.
All the popular kids. Well,
It was cute though, because the dice literally had the pictures of the fire, the rocks, the brook. The
So
water,
even if
and
you
the
didn't know the
wind, yeah.
words,
You knew the
could-
picture,
Yeah.
though.
you felt it was felt. It had a very the card
It
art was
was,
beautiful too.
yes.
The game was great for what
Take
it
us
was. It just I think
back.
it lost support toward the end. Yeah. So R.I.P. Weave. Anyway, the actual roles. Oh, interesting. There's a titles matter rule. I don't know if we have titles here yet, but your goblins can have titles, and if your title is relevant, you might be able to add a die. But anyway, you take your skill, whatever the relevant skill is there, and that's your pool of dice, and you roll that many dice. So you can roll up to toward the beginning, you can roll up to 4 dice, because for the hands, legs, eyes, and mouth stats that aren't predefined, you assign a 1, 2, 3, or 4 to each one, depending on which one you would like to be the most, which one you'd like to be the least. And that's how many dice you roll when you do that roll. When you roll the dice, there is an explicit, like, you're going to be rolling against the same thing every time. You're trying to get a 4 or higher. 5 or 6 is a full success, and a 4 is a stumble. It can count as a success, but only if you add a complication to the story, which is player decided. So you roll a 4 and you have to decide what complication makes your thing, like what happens, but then what also happens or makes things more difficult. So it's a fun little way of adding player input into the story there. So the chart that is important here is when you roll, no matter how many dice you roll, 0 successes, you are unsuccessful. Your failure is spectacular. 1 success, you are successful, but only partially or with great effort. 2 successes, you are successful. 3 successes, your success is profound. 4 successes, your impressive success even gives you something extra. So I like that there's the aspect of no matter what, if you get at least 1 success, you're going to succeed. Maybe there's partially or great effort, but then that's a different axis than stumbles, which you have to, basically a stumble is a failure until you make it otherwise, until you add a complication, like you have to earn it basically. And there's a section on adding complications. To upgrade a stumble into a proper success, you have to add a complication that makes life a little more tricky, urgent, or chaotic. In short, more fun. Whoever rolled the stumble gets to offer a complication to the TP who can accept it, but all players can suggest ideas. When acting under the influence of 1 or more complications, the TP may decide that you are impaired. You roll 1 fewer dice. Ever tried to screw in a light bulb while concussed and your hands covered in bee stings?
No.
And I have not either, but I
don't
wouldn't
think I've
want
ever
to.
even changed a light bulb.
What?
Really? That can't be true.
I don't know.
You've blocked it out. It's too painful.
It's too big. I hate changing light bulbs. That shit, there's nothing that I feel less motivated to do in life. I will just let myself be in darkness. I'll get a new fucking light.
The nice part is you can pick one that's not like a harsh, like, white light.
Tungsten.
Like if you get one that's like yellow or something.
I need to be able to install those like overhead whatever lights
Fluorescents?
they use in like classrooms.
Fluorescent?
No.
I need to install those in my house. Yeah, I need
bulb.
those. I need
They're
those
bad for
just
your
to, like,
brain.
keep me insane a little
And
bit.
like have like a little fly stuck in there so you can just hear that constantly. Just buzzing
Yes. This is evocative. Anyway,
Just pick the spoon
So-
back up, and we're here.
around.
I'm right back there with you.
it's awesome that we're doing the focus game and chose the fucking ADHD ass GM for it. But I've had coffee.
I don't play Minecraft.
Once per this game, can one of us go goblin mode? Do we have
I think
permission?
all this game.
Homebrew
Homebrew
rule.
rule? Can I go?
That's the focus. That's the focus,
Okay.
baby. That's
When I
goblin
get
mode.
focus, I'm gonna go goblin mode.
Okay, so that's adding complications. In a situation where you are trying something impossible, this is an optional role here, but it is, there's no reason not to include it. The kind of action, it's like just a really, 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 really hard roll, like the riskiest roll. When the odds are clearly stacked against the goblins, roll is normal, but now all stumbles subtract a success unless they are upgraded into no success with a complication. So in a really, really hard roll, a 4 would not be it would start as -1 success, and then if you add a complication, it zeroes out instead of going to +1 success. So who knows if that'll come up. If y'all try something really stupid, it might come up, but that doesn't matter as much. Not rolling dice, that's just kind of talking about whether or not you should actually roll dice for a thing. If a thing is trivial, if there's no reason for it to be risky, or if it's impossible, just don't do it. And then there's also, this is kind of where they go into the 0 and infinity skills. Now, if you're wondering about the stats with the strange numbers, if you roll 0 dice, then you have 0 successes and automatically fail. That's obvious, right? And with frame always being at 0, that means any feats of brute strength are pretty much impossible for the goblins. They need to come at that problem from a different angle. On the other hand, if you would roll an infinite number of dice, you would automatically succeed with infinite successes, right? That sounds cool until you figure out that this also means you'd have to decide on an infinite number of stumbles. And while that is certainly silly, and thus in the spirit of the game, it's clearly way too much work. I mean, who has time for that? I know I don't. So as a compromise, if you would roll infinite dice, don't. Simply treat the action as if you had rolled 2 successes. That essentially means with a goblin's heart being infinite that you are able to persist in all matters of energy, endurance, or toughness, no matter how unlikely. Just kind of sweet there. But I think it does have narrative implications, which is fun.
Goblins don't
So
have
I'll be the
depression.
judge if that skill comes into play.
They do, but they persevere.
Yeah.
Nonetheless. And there's a section on goblin resilience, which is just, regardless of the outcome of a roll, the player goblins will not die during the game, which is awesome because this is a prequel. Even falling from the sky without a parachute will just leave the goblin banged up, but very much alive. Okay, so there's group actions, help actions, competing actions. So group actions are the type of action where you all contribute. In this case, the players all roll their dice for themselves at the same time. Once successes and stumbles are counted, players can offer their dice to others to help them succeed or to improve their level of success. And yes, you can offer your stumble dice to others to push your complications onto them. So if there's like a group action that everyone needs to do, if someone succeeds more than someone else, you can be like, oh, you can take my dice. But if you're getting rid of a stumble, then they'll have to deal with the complications. There's also help action. You can help one of your own when they try something difficult. The goblin leading the action will roll as normal, but can add 1 die for each goblin that can conceivably help. Just hope these don't add complications.
I'm
Then there's competing.
curious. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious if that can be done after a roll is seen, or if it's specifically meant before. Because the game, I don't think really
For the help
for the
actions?
help action specifically. The game doesn't really specifically mention like intricate details, like if you're rolling each dice one at a time, all at once, all 5 of those. But with this, it just seems, with that last line, just hope that these don't add complications, that there should be a way to separate which.
It does
I
seem to
would-
me like it's
I
like,
would-
oh, I haven't quite
Yeah.
made it. Go ahead, give me 1 die. Fingers crossed that it's not an additional complication.
I don't know. In my head, I saw it as like the goblins, you have to decide who's helping at the beginning. Because I feel like you'd be more likely to ask for help
Help me.
depending on, like, if you're using like a skill you're not good at. But depending on the scenario, I think it's more of a GM ruling thing.
Well-
So, like, hypothetically, if there's a situation where I feel like you could try to add in, yeah, I think that's fine if you try to add it in and then maybe there's a complication. And then there's competing actions where it's if goblins, PvP type thing, where all involved players roll normally and only the goblin with the most successes actually succeeds, but reduced by the number of successes of the second best roll. All other goblins are treated as if they rolled 0 successes. If multiple goblins tie for the most successes, then nobody wins and they all fail spectacularly.
But we won't compete because our goblins have always worked together
get
as a
along
cohesive
so well.
unit. We
That never happens.
We went
We
to
did.
therapy and we got
Yeah.
better.
The therapy has not happened yet. Canonically. We did have a session where we did family therapy. That was just a whole session where they went through therapy.
And we needed it. That was good,
after that-
honestly.
After that,
Was
one of
that after the
characters became
therapy?
a dog.
I thought that was before the therapy.
I actually, can't remember.
It was before
I thought it was
therapy.
before therapy. I
Pretty
thought
soon
therapy
after.
cured the dog.
Oh,
I don't know either.
remember.
a lot of lore.
So that is the gameplay stuff. Are there questions about that? Okay, now we'll talk a little bit about the village generate, or like the collective collaboration for creating the world, because we already have the world. In the context of this game, I don't know how, we don't have to be specific through the Weave lore, because it's defined and we don't really necessarily need to keep that.
Should we be children?
We don't need to hold space for
Yeah,
that.
I think we're young.
Like, this is us growing up?
That's a good question, in that I wanted to talk about when exactly this takes place, because some of the events that were happening beforehand where you had come back from studying abroad
In Goblin Britain.
and
In Goblin Britain.
You being
And you both have-
Tori's goblin
Gatos, Tori's
had come back
character.
from studying abroad.
and Anish,
I was adopted.
you were adopted, but I imagine that happened a long time ago.
I don't think we ever mentioned the critical detail that all of our goblins were related.
Yeah,
We're a
family.
kin.
We're a
Yeah.
family.
So yeah, before we go into the generation, let's just talk about our goblins, our little goblin family.
Our origins are humble. I think we ate our
Yeah.
mom
Yeah.
after
Which is
we were
just
born.
the case in that game. It was like when you come into the womb, they feast upon the mother's carcass.
I think it's kind of funnier if that's
little-
not normal and y'all just did that.
because
What if Abraham
very tonally.
Lincoln just did that? I guess it was JFK. I know his hat went flying. Anyway. Anyway.
So we're introducing our character.
we
Restart.
So
Step one.
Tori, I guess, gets the focus now before we've started.
we were in a nest. I also think Tofu was so strong because I want to say you were a goblin and something else, because you were like twice everyone else's height, like
Yeah,
a
we
goblin
did
and a
something with
human or
that.
something like that. Yeah, so Gatos is like the funniest and like most charming and like smart. He studied abroad. Everyone really likes him, yeah. But in reality, he lies about almost every aspect of his life and deeply needs other people to like him and validate him.
And we don't know your accent is fake yet.
Yeah, no,
potentially.
I was at Goblin Britain because we all grew up in the same place.
So does this imply you did the accent?
and then I
first?
was Gale's. What?
Yeah, if it's before you
Depending
did
on if we
Goblin
did this
Britain,
before
Oh,
or
right.
you already
after
have the
you
accent
came back
before.
It'd be
That's what
funny
I'm
if you
saying.
had the
Like,
accent
it implies-
before you went to we could talk about whether we want to do it before or after. And also, isn't the truth that you went to
God.
Goblin, Ohio
Yeah.
instead, I believe?
Ahead of our time.
And I was the Gales, which is the wind character, so I was very nimble and acrobatic. In this version, I'm going to try to play one called the Rambler, which is supposed to be charismatic because I think that's how Gatos sees himself. But what I like about it is it describes you can either like charm somebody or like grimace, I think was the word they used, into doing something. So it's not that you're necessarily charming. It might be that you're so off-putting they just want the interaction to be over. So
That's
yeah.
perfect.
Like the purple guy?
Like from FNAF or...
No, Grimace. You said Grimace.
My character, I played Matt, which was spelled Matte. She was glittery. She glowed. She also was very, very close with her sister.
Qawg.
Cow.
Cawg. Qawg, kind of the ditzy younger sibling, a little aloof, little nerdy. Kind of isn't listened to by the group, but was originally the Brooks player, the water, aka social player. But despite being the social player, was not great at social interactions.
Or shy.
Or at least I played her that way. Qawg tried to really replicate her sister's style, but to less effect.
We worked in the circus together.
We worked in the circus together. And one thing of note, timeline-wise, Qawg did die at some point.
Right.
Was shot with an arrow through the head.
I forgot about that.
She had a huge complex about the arrow and how it looked. I don't know if we exist in a timeline before she got
so
shot
sad.
or after.
We get to see like her before the trauma.
Well, once we've introduced all the characters, I think we'll go through each detail that we think of and decide whether it's before or after. How about that?
Yeah. But that's a quick intro.
Did I make it up that Matt wore a shirt that says "You are not immune to propaganda," and then on the back of his shorts it said "propaganda"?
I drew that as art at one point because Matt is a tinkerer. She was crafty. Like I had a skill that it was just like you can make shit when you need it, which is perfect for the playbook that I'm using, which is the rowdy. Like, for example, I can spend the focus to be prepared and just produce a handheld tool or simple gizmo that would work in a situation. So I'm very crafty. She was thick, but who knows when that happened. Maybe this was before she before she really filled out. And yes, I was the flames. So that was like magic and intellect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that correct?
And you were using that intellect and magic to tinker
translated
and make
into
a
lot of
fun.
tinkering.
And despite being the social person, I think Qawg often played the straight man of the group in terms of like the rules follower, and because of that, I am my playbook will be the square.
And you were Brooks, correct? Did you say that already?
Yep.
Well, that leaves just one.
Anticipation build
more
up
character.
for my character Tofu, who was the adopted fourth child of the family. Tofu, there's no real solution for where Tofu comes from. It just kind of appeared one day. Tofu is much bigger than every other goblin. We, did a lot of rowdy stuff, and every time Tofu goes in, just always eats anything, which is why I'm the nibbler. One of the key story beats of that campaign was me eating a mushroom that infected my body, and then us being directed to a group of mushroom people. It did kill me, but it also brought me.
You died in like the first
I was undead, and then it
undead.
brought me back to life, kind of. I don't really remember how that resolved, but
as like a zombie sort of fungus. Yeah.
You gain the magical power to punch
a
people
note falls out
so hard that a note would fall down.
Yes.
Telling us exactly what to do.
I
forgot
also
that was the
somehow got a
origin
book
story.
that gave me the power to summon sea creatures. And so we were at a wedding, and Cow was trying to impress her crush, and I summoned
I had
a
a crush.
massive whale
Here.
and killed the crush.
And killed him. And he
killed
died.
Crush. And that is when we started therapy.
did.
That
He died.
is
He
the exact
died.
moment.
He died. He got
He died. He
because
100
there was a
then we had
giant
to go to
great blue
therapy.
whale that smashed the table in the.
I think he got brought back.
No. I
Okay,
remember
but it
Gear- I
might have been
remember
a
Gear being
situation
part of
where
the
he
epilogue.
died. We went to family therapy. You realized how tense it was, and you were like, let's go to the doctor's office. Maybe he's okay.
Also, didn't you have a crush, Matt? And that was like an
Yes.
early Chapel Roan.
I remember this. Yes,
my
yes,
gosh.
yes. Dazzle the Bard.
Yes.
Yes.
Dazzle
On
the Bard.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
kind of
Dazzle
predicted
the
Chapel
Bard.
Roan.
Yeah, she had like gorgeous curly
They all
red
ended up
hair,
together.
right?
And she was also because she had an affair with the Empress who died. God, this is making me kind of emotional.
I know everybody listening does not give a fuck about
Yeah.
all these like random stories.
You're like, oh.
Not a
All our two
single
listeners,
fuck.
right?
We're just throwing out random ass shit. Like, okay, I'm sure that happened.
They're like, is this part of it? Did the game start?
Tofu was big and strong, but also liked eating things. So that's why I picked the nibbler, because I think one of the fun aspects of the nibbler is that you can eat stuff and become the things that you eat. Mm-hmm.
Like Kirby.
Bug snacks.
You are
Or
what you
bug
eat.
snacks.
I'm going to read, I just think it's fun. I found my original recap of our first ever session. So I'm going to read my little first paragraph description, not of the session. I might read the rest of the session later just because it's kind of cute, but I'm going to read like just the description of the characters that I have. We join our 4 heroes in the Lashir Empire. They have been summoned to the throne room to complete a very special quest for the Empress. Our party features Tofu, the lovably dumb tough one, Gatos, the foreign one, Matt, the sexy smart one, and Kaug, the fashionable and kind one. Much to the surprise of Empress Vivacious, all of our heroes are goblins. They were all born in the same litter a few years ago, because goblins don't live that long, raised from birth as siblings, except Tofu. He's adopted. So that pretty much covers that. So in terms of when we want to set this, I mean, we could set it as early as right before that happened. We could set it, like, I would say a big event is the Goblin Britain thing. Do you want to have it before or after you studied abroad?
I love the idea of the accent. I honestly like the idea of us being children. Like, I don't know. What do
I'm
y'all
down.
think about that?
I'm down for it. And I think you could still do that accent. It could be like, someday I'll
Yeah.
get to
Someday I'll be back to
get
visit
study
you.
abroad. Yeah.
I know my ma's out there. I didn't know about yours. So,
Your ma?
oi, mister. Me mum.
We ate our mum.
No, we ate your mum. I know my mum's over there.
God just has to return to.
Yeah. She's probably famous, yeah.
By the way, we are halfway through the rule book.
God damn, really?
More
I mean,
than halfway.
we'll get to the part that's just
Yeah.
half of it's just the fucking playbook, and another half of it is stuff that's for me. So don't worry about it. I said half of it is something, and another half of it. How many halves are there? 3?
Okay.
Okay, so y'all want to be like children?
Wang.
think
It's like
that's
in
fun.
stark
Okay.
contrast to the original play, which was very raunchy and explicit. This one would be more like wholesome, and I don't know. What do y'all think?
I like it.
I really like the idea of this is because we all went and lived lives and then came together for the campaign that we did. You know, like we all had backstories already. What if this is like the summer after senior year?
Right before we go
And,
off.
like which would be younger because goblins go off as pretty young.
So like
in ours,
a
but
year.
like we're like
all,
ready
like, a year
to
or two old.
we're almost ready to like leave and this is
Yeah,
our
I probably
last
won't see you
hurrah
again. Yeah.
together.
Oh, okay. So, have y'all like worked with the circus yet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I don't know. What do you think? Calb?
Maybe have expressed interest in doing so.
Yeah. Maybe the circus comes to town in this one.
Whoa.
Okay.
I
So,
like it.
arrow or no arrow?
No arrow.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
Start
I'm
of
gonna
an era.
cry.
Disturbed.
Hey, that's a good
Sweet
one, Tori.
baby.
Okay. Cool. All right. So, in terms of the collective collaboration, world creation, we'll skip some steps because obviously we have some of the world. So the 4 steps are pick an unfavorable world, pick the leader of the Ken, find out what's special about this Ken, give the Ken a name. The Ken, Kenn, is like the goblin sort of clan, like just your little village. And the way that
It's
this is
Kenough.
presented like they live, yeah, exactly. This is presented like they live kind of on the margins of like a human society type thing, which, I mean, I think we just kind of had the goblin village as being kind of remote. So we don't have to be specific about that, I will say. So we'll skip the first part. But honestly, I'd love you all to roll some d20s to generate some stuff because I know that when we played, you guys did visit it started in the capital city, but you did go back home a couple times. We established that the government was a council of elders. I don't know if you remember this. It was like a council of the oldest goblins in the town.
Didn't a dragon burn down our entire town eventually?
And you tried to flirt with the dragon, right?
And there was
Who tried to flirt with the dragon?
Me?
The dragon ended up being like married to Scour the Bonk Brained.
That's right.
An incredibly important
that?
NPC.
What are we rolling?
So
20.
each of you will roll 1d20, and that will essentially, you have to have there's a goblin leader of the Ken, which I like to think that honestly the Council of Elders hasn't even been established yet, and that got established since. So like this is like the leader, and maybe this person will establish a Council of Elders, or maybe this person is. In my head, this person is probably dead by the time that our campaign started. So this person is the like last remaining leader of the village. So in the order of my screens, it's Anish, Mikey, Emma, Tori. So I'll take Anish's D20 first, and then then Mikey, Emma, Tori.
And I don't know if we said it already, but the Ken is the game-specific terminology for the Goblin Society we're a part of. And I think the ultimate goal of the game, if we were to continue playing, would be to gain enough titles so that we could become the leader of our own Ken.
Yeah, they said they was really excited for me, maybe for that position. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going off to Britain to get some titles. But I rolled a 10.
Okay.
An ominous cultist lair.
Whoa.
No, I'm skipping the unfavorable world part because there's technically, I think, 5, so I'm just doing the 4. This is for the goblin leader.
Got it.
Or actually, no. I'll roll the goblin leader names because this seems to... We'll do the icebreaker questions, I think, is a better question for that. So keep your 10, though, Anish.
Okay.
Okay, so the leader name that I have made is Lolly Snot Grabber.
Beautiful.
Incredible.
Is the goblin leader. I also I'll just roll for the unfavorable world as well, which I rolled a traveling circus caravan, which I think is perfect. The Ken lives in the margins of a traveling circus caravan.
If you had rolled a 20,
New York.
New York
would be New York. I want to be in New York. Please.
Goblin New York.
Goblin
I've been
New
there,
York.
overrated, yeah. One enough big pots for me, yeah, so. Had to take it to the Goblin Globe.
With Goblin Shakespeare. Okay, so yes, I would say like we've got this established sort of remote thing, but I will say that will be relevant. So then we decide about Lolly Snot Grabber. Let's go into the icebreaker questions. Pick a question and offer an answer. If you want to, so you've rolled a question. What originally attracted the Ken's founder to this place, Anish?
I think Lolly Snot Grabber was interested in this place on the margins of a little circus caravan. I think because of the geography. Like, we're nestled up against, like, some rocks that make for some good little hidey holes and dens. And Lolly Snot Grabber, famous for making little tunnels.
The Ken Den.
The Ken Den.
It's like that spot on Hyrule Temple in Smash Brothers, the Dave Cave, where you can, like, get hit and, like, bounce off the...
Yeah, it's a pretty similar situation here.
Awesome. What if, since we said it's in the margins of the traveling circus thing, what if this establishment was also partially decided because it was adjacent to this, but they didn't realize it was traveling, so they thought this was a permanent establishment there, and then it left, and they're like, oh.
That's funny.
That's incredible. And now we're just here.
And then it comes back every once in a while.
And then, Mikey, what'd you roll?
Oh. I rolled a 1.
What is this What is the larger settlement around the Ken known for? So what would the circus caravan be known for?
That is a really interesting question. I feel like the caravan is known for... So you know how a lot of circuses and things have like, oh, see the smallest horse in the world, blah, 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 blah. I think this one is known for its extreme sized things, whether it be like the largest tomato ever or like the smallest this thing. And so it's very like popular for those attractions of, extreme sizes.
Excellent.
And I'm sorry, it's stationary or it's not?
So
It's stationary. It's built next to a caravan, a circus
Uh-huh.
caravan, and then the circus caravan left.
Oh, they left us behind. Okay.
because what I remember from our game is that you guys had established like you had like a tree house that you lived in, so that was a stationary location. And I think the caravan probably comes back into town at times, but like I think that it's funny if y'all thought that that was a permanent fixture and was like we'll create it here, and then it moved away.
I also think what you just added to the lore, Mikey, works really well with what I remember, which is that the circus included dinosaurs.
It did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
the
That's.
largest lizards.
Yeah. No. Exactly. That's great.
Don't
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at them.
Awesome. Emma, what'd you roll?
I rolled a 3.
That is. How does the Ken stay hidden, camouflaged, always moving? So we established not always moving, but like. Also, if you don't like a question, you can change it. But if you do like a question, you can.
I like it. How do we stay hidden camouflage? I think that we're built in very natural materials. Like we live in a tree. I'm sure there's like hobbit holes. Like
Yeah, Anish mentioned
if you're
burrowing.
if you're just passing through, it wouldn't strike you as a town even. But if you know where to look, you start noticing like the doors on things. So in the case that we have to be private or hide, we can just close our doors and put our little moss coverings on things, and we look like part of the landscape.
Okay. And Tori?
Let us see. An 11, please.
Which outsiders are opposed to the Ken? Why are they wrong? I will say we do have beef, like established beef in the universe between the goblins and the dwarves, if you remember that.
Yes.
But you can also have something else if you'd like, or choose a different question if you prefer.
I'm going to say whoever was in the traveling circus didn't like the fact that we bunkered down so close to them. Maybe us digging our tunnels led to some uneven terrain, which freaked their wagons up. And I think because of that, maybe they're like, we're never making this stop again. And now the people who live in this adjacent town or the town around us is like, well, what the heck, goblins? But what the reason they're wrong, is because if they actually went down in the tunnel, it actually is really cool. And that's also where I live. So it's like, I don't know why they're mad. They got me. It's like, who needs a circus when you got the whole damn,
Cloud.
Okay, TP's got the focus now.
Awesome. So that sounds great. Do we want a name for the Ken? Could be based on the leader or the place.
What did you read on that? Recap?
The Lashir Empire is the name of the overall empire that y'all are contained within, but
Oh,
Our settlement should be next year.
go.
called what?
Because there's last year, and we're in the next year.
Maybe next year.
Okay, awesome. So we fleshed out our Ken a little bit, which were some details that I know we didn't have as much before. So now we'll just talk about the playbooks briefly. So y'all have picked your playbooks. In terms of character creation, there are 6 steps. Pick a playbook, distribute the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 among your stats, determine identity details of name and look, and check your starting feats, pick an advanced feat, and introduce your goblin to the table. We've already introduced our goblins. We know our goblins. So let's just go one by one and talk about each of our characters. So if we want to do it in that same order that we did either the rolls in or when y'all introduced the goblins, just take it however you want, I suppose. Jump in.
We'll probably want to save the best for last, so I'll go last, yeah. We'll just do the same what we just did.
Once again, I am playing Matt, the handy goblin. My playbook is the rowdy, courageous, and resourceful. And my hand is a 3. They're capable hands. I have inquisitive eyes with a 4. I have wiry legs with just a 1. And then I have a toothy mouth. That's my 2. My frame is bandaged, and my heart is loud. That's my setup. I can have unlikely knowledge. I have harebrained schemes. I'm skilled with my hands, and I'm always prepared. I get to pick 1 advanced feat as well. Do we want to go over those right now?
Just what they are?
Like what I'm picking for that, or did we?
Yeah,
already
yeah. You
declare?
can say what you. I'll say, since there are so many feats, and I know each of them have their specific details. Just each of you can read what your advanced feat that you pick is and describe that one.
My advanced feat is Grease Fingers. I can spend the focus and roll hands to assemble an impressive and haphazard machine out of the items around me, and I describe what unfitting objects I'm building it with.
That is, I think, literally something you could do in our original game, right?
Yeah,
That's dope.
I'm very excited.
Okay, that's your character. I believe Anish, you were next.
Yes. Again, to reintroduce Qubz, I will be playing the Square, the serious and solid class. As for how I'm distributing my stats, I'm putting a 4 in mouth, and the word I picked for that is tender. 3 in eyes, the word I picked for that is calm. 2 in legs, antsy, and a 1 in hands, intense. I think that paints a pretty good picture of the version of Cog we had in our previous game. One thing I will say with the Square is I actually need to read my starting feat because the class is unique. My first starting feat is Frustrated. You can't gain the focus. You are always focused. Instead, you gain the frustration when someone laughs at your worldview and doesn't take you seriously. You can spend it or overextend as normal. Wear a grumpy face when you have it. And I think the younger sibling dynamic, the younger sibling that nobody listens to, the voice of reason in a chaotic bunch, I think I'm going to be getting some frustrations often. And it's definitely helpful because it takes me out of the competition for who is the funniest. I didn't want to see those results to begin with. Other than that, I think I'm going to take my advanced feat to be Flare Up. Spend the frustration to make anyone present take you in the current situation seriously. Yes, even your goblin friends will try to uphold decorum for a while. Essentially, make people actually listen to me.
Wow, I love that.
Stop fighting!
The anti-goof off move. Sweet. All right, that's all the deets on Cowg, right?
Pretty much.
All right, Mikey, take us to Tofu Land.
I am Tofu, and I am a nibbler, the nibbler, harmonious and hungry. My stats, I went with hands 4, filthy, legs 3, twisted, then eyes 2, feral, and mouth 1, unwashed, which I feel goes with the filthy pretty well.
True.
My starting feats I have are unlikely knowledge. I can spin the focus to introduce an unexpected fact that adds to the story, explain consequences, how I know this, harebrained schemes, spin the focus and explain your plan. If it sounds plausible, you can roll with +2 dice. Otherwise, it can still be attempted at normal difficulty, no matter how impossible. I am also hungry, so I add +1 to my mouth stat. So I have a 2 in mouth. I have Gobble Up, which means I can spin the focus to eat something and change a part of my body to match. So I shift 1 stat point and gain a new ability at the cost of another ability, like Flight for Speech, Claws for Hands, etc. You can have 1 transformation active and end it at will. And it says the ability comes from the shifting moon, my understanding of nutrition, etc., or a curse bite mark. I pick 1. So I think before I was adopted, I think I was kind of exposed to the elements and like something about the world, like saw the poor little tofu just out and alone, like in a garbage heap. And, you know, I just had to be able to eat anything. And so the world gave me the power to be able to absorb, you know, energy from any kind of food I eat. For my advanced feat, this is something I've been kind of going back and forth because I have the ability to I could have an option to have multiple transformations at the same time, be able to like vacuum stuff up into my mouth, talk to things or lick things and make it my own. So I'm not sure what I prefer. So give me a second, then we can come back to that.
I do think am I correct that everyone has unlikely knowledge and harebrained schemes? Like that's across the board?
Oh.
I think that's goblin stuff.
No.
Or that was also
Not
true
everyone
for me.
does, but some people
Oh,
do.
it is. Wow, you're right. Sorry, I was looking at the square because you've got the different ones.
The
Yes.
square is the
Oh.
only one that doesn't have harebrained
I'm the
schemes.
only one that doesn't have it. Instead of a harebrained schemes, I actually have reasonable plans where I spend frustration to explain my plan, and if it's possible, +1 dice.
That's a good point. So you all have essentially the same two, except obviously the square, because you've got the frustration, and then you've got a skill that adds something to a stat of yours. So make sure to keep that in mind on your stats. And then you've got a specific character ability.
I added my thing was skillful, so it added +1 to my hand stat. And my always prepared, which I mentioned, was that I can spend the focus to have something that is helpful. And it does ask the question, where do you keep your knickknacks? My character is wearing oversized overalls with just a ton of pockets. So it's all like on her person.
Oh my, I love the
tucked into
options they give
straps
here.
and,
Legally
like,
emancipate
pockets and
goblin kind, fix the terrible local zoning and building laws, abolish the police, or run for office.
Yeah, that's my unique
Pick one or
question.
create your own.
My big dream is I want to be as cool as Matt.
My name is Gothos, actually.
You're already cool, Cowg.
I don't think so.
We're all cool in our own ways. And as I walk, the clap of my ass cheek.
This is a wholesome
God.
game.
Ah!
It's too easy to fall back in old ways. Did you pick your thing yet,
No,
Mikey?
I'm still deciding. You go. I'll think about it.
So, Gatos is the Rambler. When you lay eyes on Gatos, you will see kind of like that picture of Elon Musk where his rib cage is so incredibly large, and it's like, how is that even possible? And so my legs are 2, and the description is toothpick. So I've got this really interesting. It's like if Wario had really tall, thin legs. My hands,
I'm
and
picturing
I have
like Gru.
Yes, Gru is a great touchstone. Of course, I've got that big frilly collar that, like, you imagine when you think of Shakespeare. My hands 3, knobby. Eyes 1, beady. My mouth is actually 5 due to my eloquent starting feat, and the descriptor is loud. My frame is flabby, and my heart is desperate. In addition to unlikely knowledge and harebrained schemes, I've got tail spinner, spend the focus to tell an exciting story, and then I've got some effects that it will produce. My advanced feat, I'm going to go for Fool's Inspiration, which is if I have the focus, I can motivate a goblin to do something, and they'll get the focus and get an extra dice on their next roll.
All right, Mikey, you got that last ability for us?
Yeah, I think the one that's speaking to me the most, like there are a lot of fun ones. I'm going to go with bite-sized ? You can bite and swallow inedible or poisonous things safely. You can even store one uncomfortably large thing in your belly for a while. So I'm going to eat something.
Again, this incredibly tracks.
Yeah.
But this ability went away at some point because you ate a mushroom and it did kill you.
Well, it's a special mushroom.
Actually.
That calls into question whether that was actually accurate or not. We'll never. This might change
Wow.
this might give a new flavor to the canon of our. Anyway, that's all we need to go through for our read episode. I'm pretty sure, right?
Woo!
Yay!
The rest of the book is just for me, so we might break back into the idea of doing it behind the screen because I kind of want to talk through what I rolled, so I might do that while y'all are on break.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you so much. We will see you with these goblins at a different side of this very dusty, ancient table that has long been sitting idle in need of some players.
But familiar table. Loved.
An old friend of a table.
A worn, loved table.
A family member that you've forgotten
A
to call.
table that no one could replace. A table.
A table.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.